A little girl runs across the wet sand because the sea has suddenly disappeared. Seconds earlier, the water had been where it always was, washing gently onto a crowded beach in Thailand. Now it is pulling away so fast that fish are left flapping on the exposed seabed. Adults stop and stare. Some laugh. Some reach for cameras. Children run closer, excited by the strange new world appearing in front of them. But the girl feels something colder than curiosity. In school, she had learned that when the sea suddenly retreats like this, it can mean one thing: a tsunami is coming. Around her, hundreds of people still believe the ocean is doing something strange but harmless. She is one of the only people on that beach who understands that the ocean is not leaving. It is about to come back and kill. On the morning of December 26th, 2004, millions of people around the Indian Ocean were living through their last minutes of normal life without knowing it. Tourists were drinking coffee. Fishermen were already at sea. Vendors were opening stalls. And families were taking photos on beaches in Thailand, Sri Lanka, and Indonesia. Everything looked peaceful. But far below the surface, the deadliest chain reaction of the century had already begun. The Indian Ocean touches some of the most densely populated coastlines on Earth. Around it live fishermen, hotel workers, tourists, children. Entire towns and villages built only meters above sea level. Along many shores, fragile wooden homes stand beside expensive resorts. Poverty and paradise share the same coastline. Off northern Sumatra lies one of the most seismically active regions on the planet. Earthquakes are part of life there. But in 2004, the Indian Ocean had one enormous weakness. It did not have a full tsunami warning system like the Pacific already had. That missing system changes the meaning of the tragedy. This was not only a story of a violent earthquake, it was also a story of a region known to be exposed, filled with millions of vulnerable people, but left without a working chain that could turn scientific detection into public survival. That was the first break in the chain. At 7:58 a.m. local time, a magnitude 9.1 earthquake struck beneath the Indian Ocean off the coast of northern Sumatra. It was one of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded. A massive section of the seafloor was forced upward. That upward movement is what matters most. A tsunami does not begin as a giant wave at the shore. It begins when a huge volume of water is suddenly displaced. In this case, the seabed rose and the water above it rose with it. In seconds, a huge amount of energy was pushed into the ocean. That is the next link in the chain. The earthquake moved the seabed moved the water. The moving water became a tsunami racing outward in every direction. In deep water, a tsunami can travel at enormous speed while remaining almost invisible from the surface. But when it reaches shallow coastal water, the physics changes. The wave slows its energy, compresses its height, rises, and the ocean that looked calm only minutes earlier becomes a weapon. Now that weapon was heading toward coastlines full of people who had no idea it was coming. Then the ocean began to show its hand. On beaches across the region, the water started pulling back from shore. Rocks appeared where water should have been. Fish were left stranded on the sand. The seabed lay exposed beneath the morning sun. To many people, it looked fascinating, so they moved closer. That is one of the cruelest links in the disaster. When people do not understand a warning sign, they walk toward danger instead of away from it. Except for one child. A 10-year-old British girl named Tilly Smith had recently learned in school that a rapidly retreating sea could signal an incoming tsunami. The moment she saw the beach emptying, she understood what was happening. She began shouting to her parents that everyone needed to leave. They listened. Hotel staff were alerted. The beach at Macau was evacuated. Around 100 people survived because one child understood what the adults did not. That moment proved something essential: the danger was not completely invisible. In some places, the warning existed in plain sight, but knowledge was missing, and without knowledge, a visible warning becomes useless. But the disaster did not strike every coastline in the same way. Near the source of the earthquake, in places like Banda, Aceh, in northern Sumatra, the tsunami arrived with terrifying speed. People had almost no time to interpret what had happened, no time to organize, and almost no time to run. In some areas, the first waves struck within minutes of the earthquake. In the closest zones, the chain was brutally short. Earthquake, seabed uplift, tsunami, impact. When the water came ashore, it was not a normal wave. It was a dense, fast-moving wall of brown water tearing through streets, trees, cars, fishing boats, and people. Survivors described a deep roar as the sea surged inland and ripped entire districts apart. Cars were lifted and spun. Concrete buildings failed. Palm trees were torn out. People trying to escape on foot were swallowed in seconds. In Banda Aceh and the areas nearest the epicenter, the tsunami was almost immediate. There, the disaster gave people almost no chance at all. But the farther the tsunami traveled, the more disturbing the story became. In places farther from the earthquake, the waves did not arrive immediately. In Thailand, for example, the tsunami reached some beaches roughly 2 hours after the earthquake. 2 hours. That single fact changes everything. It means this was not a tragedy in which every victim was trapped by speed alone. In many places, time existed. Beaches could have been cleared. Hotels could have sounded alarms. Families could have run uphill. Thousands more could have lived. And that is where the disaster stops being only geological and becomes institutional. Scientists detected the earthquake quickly and understood that a tsunami threat was possible. The knowledge existed. The technology existed. But in 2004, the Indian Ocean had no established regional warning chain capable of turning technical detection into immediate public evacuation. That missing chain was fatal. In the closest zones, people died because the wave came too fast. In the farther zones, many died because warning came too slowly, or never came at all. The science saw the danger. The ocean showed the danger. But the people on the shoreline were not told in time. By the time the tsunami had finished crossing the Indian Ocean, it had killed around 230,000 people across multiple countries. Indonesia suffered the worst losses, especially in Aceh. Sri Lanka, India, Thailand, and the Maldives were devastated. Citizens from dozens of countries were among the dead. In Sri Lanka, one of the most horrifying moments came when a passenger train packed with people was overwhelmed by the waves. Around 1,700 people were killed. It remains one of the deadliest rail disasters in history, and the tsunami did not stop in South Asia. It crossed the ocean and still carried enough force to kill people on the coast of East Africa, thousands of kilometers from where the seabed had first ruptured. But numbers alone cannot capture what was lost. Entire families disappeared in a single morning. Fishing communities lost homes, boats, and generations of workers. Hospitals were overwhelmed. Children were orphaned. Survivors searched through wreckage for names, faces, and fragments of ordinary life. And when the water was gone, the disaster was not over. After the disaster, the world moved to create what should already have existed, a tsunami warning system for the Indian Ocean. Monitoring improved. Communication between countries became more coordinated. Alerts could now move faster than they had on that morning in 2004. But that progress also forces a painful conclusion. This was never only a story about a wave. It was a story about everything that happened before the wave. A region known to be vulnerable had been left without a warning chain. An undersea earthquake lifted the ocean. That movement sent a tsunami racing toward shore. The sea pulled back and revealed the danger. Most people did not understand what they were seeing. In some places, the wave arrived too quickly. In others, warning failed to arrive quickly enough. Which brings us back to the child on the beach. Around her, adults saw something strange. She saw a message. And on that morning, the difference between life and death was often no bigger than that whether someone understood what the ocean was trying to say. The sea did not scream first. It stepped back in silence. And in far too many places, people walked toward it. When the ocean returned, it collected the price of that delay.